old business. Item A, to consider approval of supplemental appropriation from the general fund in the amount of $168,000 for the Brisbane Community Pool renovation project. Staff report, please.
Mayor, members of the council, a few weeks ago you approved authorization to advertise this project, and you also approved authorization to have the mayor sign the contract when bids were open, but we wanted to bring this back to you because bid prices came in a bit higher than the construction estimate that we put forth when we did the budget back in the summer. And when we put this project out to bid, we had a mandatory pre-bid meeting. We had attendance by 4 specialty pool contractors that this is their expertise, and we ended up having only 2 of those submit bids. Both of those bids were within about 10% of each other, the low bid being $368,000. Distracting me. So the specialty contractors, we think maybe would bid a little bit more on the concrete deck work than you might have gotten from a general contractor. That was one reason that we think the prices were higher. And the other thing is that at the time that we budgeted this project, we envisioned replastering the pool and replacing the tile, and then repairing the concrete deck where there's spalling and where we've had rust come through from shallow rebar. And when we brought out a consultant and walked the site and did the design, we added a few elements. So there was what we're calling scope creep. Is we decided to expand the work a little bit. We hadn't planned to replaster the wading pool. We added that to the scope. They suggested that we upgrade the lighting and put LED lights in the pool, and with that you get all new conductors, and we've kind of had intermittent problems with those lights working, so we're redoing all of that. And with those items added to the budget, we got bids that were 70% above what that number that we projected back in July. So we are asking for supplemental appropriation to fund this low bid construction contract amount of $368,000 approximately. So a supplemental appropriation of $168,000.
And if I may, Madam Mayor, excuse me, this did go through the subcommittee of facility subcommittee of Ray and myself, and we did view it and felt really it's come down. We really didn't have a choice. We either do it or we don't. And I think really the timing of everything is probably good. And Stuart, you might want to give some finance background to help what helped solidify our recommendation as a subcommittee. So
sure. So at the beginning of the year with the projections, we are doing much better than anticipated. I think I've been trying to keep the council up to date as much as I can. But sales tax, we projected about $2.5 million for this year. The last 4 quarters, we have taken in about $3 million in sales tax in the city, so we're about $500,000 higher than projected in sales tax. We also projected about $2.1 million in transient occupancy tax. I will tell you the DoubleTree Hotel is doing phenomenally for us. We are going to probably end up somewhere in the range of $2.3 million in transient occupancy tax. I was talking to the general managers last night at the chamber mixer, and the Homewood Suites is up 26% for the year from the previous year, and they're projecting for a calendar year 2016 another 9% increase in their revenues. So they're doing very well. In addition to that, we, after refinancing the successor agency bonds, the redevelopment bonds, we have extra money coming in from property tax from that. So we are probably going to be in the neighborhood of $700,000 to $1 million more in revenues than anticipated going for this current fiscal year.
So with that, since you brought up the budget and that we're doing better than we had expected, we're still, even with that change of the $100,000 with the capital improvement projects, besides the pool that we're doing, we're still running in a deficit budget, so just so that the public doesn't get the wrong impression that we've got a lot of extra surplus cash. We're still running a deficit budget for this year. Is that correct?
At this point, I would say we're probably still in the deficit position. We'll see how some of the expenditures go and some of the hirings go for the rest of the year. We might be able to break even from the general fund perspective this year. At this point, we're still, early in the year. I wouldn't guarantee that.
Okay. Any discussion, comments,
I have a question. Oh,
Go ahead.
questions for staff?
yeah. The only question I have is, that, so we had this original 168,000, and you thought that a general contractor could do the work, but now we have this specialty work. Did you guys ever think of splitting up the job? And I don't know if that's feasible or not, where you could have the specialty work by these guys, Tricon Aquatics, and then the other work done by a general contractor to save money.
Yes, and it sounds like you clarified the first part is it could be a general contractor doing the deck, but you need a specialty contractor doing the actual pool shell. And we did look at that, but we didn't want to have two different contractors on site having to negotiate with each other. You kind of want a general in that situation when they both need the same space.
Okay.
To make that work. So we could have done it at two different times, but that was kind of the decision the facilities subcommittee recommended is let's go in, close it, and get everything done rather than trying to.
They could be done as quick as possible, sure. Okay.
And I had a question about the bidding process. So the staff report said that there was a pre-bid meeting and there were 5 contractors at that time interested, and then only 2 submitted bids. So do we know what happened to the other 3? Or why, if there's any reason why they weren't interested?
No, I didn't actually contact them. Sometimes they
Okay.
are busy. They all knew what the process was and when the deadline was. That's true. That's a good point. The consultant gave us 8 of these pool contractors that we specifically sent the notice inviting bids to, other than the normal ways that we advertise projects. And 5 of them were from Southern California, so some of the ones that came, yes, were from out of the area, and then maybe those were the ones that didn't.
And where, the one that you selected, where is that one from?
Rancho Cordova.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one question for the subcommittee, if I may. The wading pool that we originally wasn't in the scope, and then we talked about that it came for a bid, that we would make a decision if that added to the scope of work substantially, that we would readdress that and see if it was something that we wanted to proceed with. And so I wondered if that specific portion was teased out of the bid to give us an idea of the cost of that, because we still, before we had a differing opinion earlier on whether that would be feasible to run or would be cost-effective to run. So,
We did talk about it.
Yeah.
And we can tell you what our cut on it, but Karen will give you the specifics.
okay.
What I remember was that, the amount for doing the wading pool, Karen, am I right? It was about $10,000?
That's correct, yeah.
And so it seemed like such a small amount out of the total proportion, and about the only way it's ever going to get done is in conjunction with the overall project. So in terms of the marginal cost, it seemed to make sense to go ahead.
And,
That was our-
and give it a try.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's,
Right?
That's correct, yeah.
any other questions for staff?
Good.
Okay, I'd be honored to make a motion to approve the supplemental appropriation from the general fund in the amount of $168,000 for the Brisbane Community Pool Renovation Project.
Before we do that, is there any members of the public that would like to speak on this? Seeing no hands, I'd entertain a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll
Sure.
second.
You got any second you want.
Got a motion in 2 seconds.
Motion in 2 seconds. Call for a vote, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. And then we will move on to staff reports, city manager's report on upcoming activities.
Just the reminder that our December schedule has us coming back a week from today for a regular council meeting. That'll be your last business meeting of the calendar year. And then our first meeting of January will be actually January 15th. Unless you would all like to come here for New Year's Day, but assuming you don't, so we'll do January 15th.
And Clay, the 15th is is that is that going to be the second?
That will be the third Thursday.
Third Thursday, okay.
So we're on a first and third
Yes,
Thursdays.
okay, good.
Thank you. And then we go to any countywide assignments subcommittee reports.
I have a couple if nobody else wants to jump in.
Go ahead,
I'm sure
Ray.
there are others, yeah. We had a meeting of the joint Park and Rec City Facilities Teen Services Committee to look at the skate park. And we were looking at some design options that have been provided by our design consultant. And we sort of looked over them and figured which ones we wanted to bring forward. And there is now planned to be a workshop for the community on January 6th, Karen?
Yeah, that's correct. Tuesday, January 6th at 5 p.m.
Okay, Tuesday, January 6th at 5 p.m. to look at the various skateboard park design options.
Yep.
And one of the things that we decided at that meeting was to have some materials that not only pictures, but also describing what the features and elements are, and advantages and disadvantages, and the relative cost of each of the options.
And will the consultant continue to use social media to get input if people aren't able to attend that meeting?
Yes, and what we're going to do is put the information out ahead of that meeting on the consultant's Facebook site and then our webpage.
Okay.
So we've just got to put together the information that Mr. Miller just explained, the pros and cons and the elements, and a little bit of background to go with the three concepts rather than just putting them out with nothing.
Okay, so that was the one meeting that a lot of people are interested in. And then I thought, Cliff, I'd just report briefly on the Baylands sustainability. We've met with our consultant and moving ahead on the sustainability framework for the Baylands. And we had one meeting in which we dealt with particularly comments from the property owner. And then we're moving ahead for another meeting to the next stage, quite shortly, actually, next week. Right?
Next week.
Yeah. So that's moving ahead, just to let you know, and then, of course, when we're finished, we'll share it with everybody.
Right.
And then I have one other thing that I, wanted to share. And I'll just report briefly because I hope we'll have a presentation at the council. I took advantage of the mosquito abatement offer for council elected officials to take the tour, which I did just yesterday. And I'll tell you, that was a really interesting tour. They have a wonderful set of facilities and labs and very top experts, and they have divided up the county among the technicians. And we have a technician who's assigned to Brisbane and had a special session with that person who then went through all the various kinds of issues in Brisbane and what they've already done and the problems and some of the new things they want to address on the mountain and so forth. And so I suggested to our representative, Bob Maynard, and people from the district that they will put together a presentation for the council, and also that they be in closer touch with our staff, because it turns out they've had some problems with some property owners. And there are things, and I've mentioned this to the city manager and to the city engineer, that, there are certain things that we could help them with. And so we need to work together. Just one further, last comment. One of the things that was interesting was that for some reason or other, they did not comment on the Baylands EIR. And yet one of the problems they're having is with, the creek that flows through across the Baylands, in which we want to have a, riparian park. And it's very important how that's designed as to how you deal with vectors. And so I hope that we can, build that into the process when we start looking at the Baylands.
Mm.
Thank you. Any other reports from subcommittees?
Yeah, so I'm on this county committee or county board, commute.org, used to be the Traffic Relief Alliance. So I'm on this special subcommittee that's dealing with strategic planning for, trying to deal with the commute in San Mateo County. So actually serving with Supervisor Pine and council member from Hillsborough. And, just looking at, some of the interesting ways to improve the commute. I mean, really, with the economy booming, it's just going to get worse. The only way that you can really deal with the commute is if there's a recession. So, I'm seriously, to really
Yeah, no,
make
you're right.
this,
It's a very high correlation.
Yes. So, but there's some really interesting stuff that they're going to be doing. We have the highest ridership of any shuttle
Right.
in the county by far, and so
Always been that way. Too.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we're going to be doing is trying to come up with an app that if you wanted to know where your shuttle was in real time, you could go to that app and look up your route, and then you could see where your shuttle bus is. So if you wanted to
Great.
finish that cup of coffee or have that last martini or whatever before you can kind of your
Yeah, no,
shuttle
that's
go
helpful
home.
because they only come to
Right.
an hour.
So yes, and so and then another thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at creating these maps for every route and then connecting all the maps throughout the county, and then not just showing the shuttles, but then showing where all the Samtran routes are located, and showing where Caltrain is, and Samtrans also has some shuttles, and then seeing how we can connect all of these different modes of public transportation together. So so it's a pretty cool thing that commute.org is doing. And then we had an SFO roundtable meeting, and so the FAA has initiated one of the new RNAV orders that has made a really positive impact on reducing noise in Brisbane. So the flights that head east, typically that would go over Brisbane, many of those flights have been eliminated. And what they're doing is they're flying this GPS navigational route that goes over the water, doesn't even go over the land. It shoots right over the bay, and then goes to these waypoints in the middle of the bay. So now there will be still some of the flights that will make the wide turn and come over Brisbane. And the reason for that is that they're older planes, and they do not have the technical capacity to handle the RNAV procedures. But those are being they're being phased out, and it should only be about 5 to 10% of all the flights that are making that route. And then hopefully in the beginning of the year, they'll start to implement the new stick procedure, which will eliminate the port procedure, and those are the flights that we get the most noise from heading west.
Right.
So the idea is for for those planes to go up the coast towards Candlestick and then make the left turn and start making their way towards Southern California. And then I had a HART board meeting, but there wasn't anything really of interest there. So.
And we did have a facility subcommittee meeting in regards to the library, and we will be coming forth with a recommendation to the council for library site. And we've also requested staff, Clay's going to do a staff report, but also is going to draft a letter for you, Terry, for your signature to Adrian Tissier in regards to the Measure A, is it? Measure A funds for library, because I think earlier staff report indicated that there are funds available for library, and our librarian is going to go advocate on behalf of the city of Brisbane for funds, and we're hoping to get anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million. Think optimistically, let's say 2. So anyway, we'll probably come forth with that first meeting in January. Is that right, Clay? Yeah.
Thank you.
That's all from me. We tried to schedule an economic development subcommittee meeting a few times, but with the storm and all, it didn't work out today. So we're going to be meeting next Monday and should be able to report on that at next Thursday's meeting.
Okay. I would also like to say that the Planning Issues Subcommittee is meeting this coming Monday,
That's right.
and that is on quarry issues
Right.
predominantly.
Right, to come up with a planning process for how we're going to move forward with a potential new commercial developer that's interested in purchasing the quarry.
Right, and I think that that's important for the public to know that there is a potential new ownership in the quarry, and so those issues will all be back on the table that we have seen before, and that is a public meeting that will be here at 7:30 in the small conference room for the subcommittee, and that is open to the public. And so I did want to get that out there. And in something that correlates to that, I was looking online to see when these subcommittees were meeting, and they're not on our website. So I would like to invite every member of the public who is interested in a specific topic to let our city clerk know, and she can keep them abreast of what meetings are happening and when they're going to be happening, so that we can get some input from the public at those subcommittee meetings, because I think that there's a lot of information that goes out in the subcommittee meetings that is not necessarily available to people until it comes to the council. And when it does, it sometimes doesn't give people the ability to have time to really respond to those issues.
Sure. It maybe is, I'm wondering if that's something we want to have as a practice, that we have all of our subcommittee meetings not, I mean, they are publicly noticed, but they're not up on our website, and I wasn't aware of that. But I think, you know, we publicly notice our council meetings on the website, so it seems like a good practice.
I think it would be. I think some of them are a little more ad hoc, and the times change a little bit more often. It's not that, and so I think that is something that we could try to discuss with city staff to get those where we have it a little more organized for the public to be able to know when they're happening. So I think that's something we can look into. So with that, we'll move on to written communications.
Madam Mayor, just
Yes.
before you move on, Maria wanted to just provide some information with regards to what Councilmember Lentz was talking about with on the shuttles.
Oh, okay.
Who is also the supervisory chair of the Peninsula Traffic Congestion Relief Alliance.
No, we're no longer called that though. Now we're
Yeah, we
.org.
actually adopted the name of commute.org.
Yeah, because it was
so that
just
we're-
too.
I'm stuck in the past.
I know a lot of people still go by MITSMA and ITSMA and the Alliance, but we're actually in the process of updating our website to promote more of the commute.org media package that we're going to be putting out soon, and I'll probably be bringing that to you at a future meeting. One of the things I did want to note, though, was in regard to the shuttles. One of the things that they do currently, it's not in real time, but if you do go to the Google Maps app on your phone or online. You can actually, if you plan a trip and you try to search routes with public transit, they actually do provide the shuttle information on there that comes into Brisbane. So if people are looking for those options, it is available currently for that. We are trying to get into real time, which is one of our goals, but for now it is nice that we do actually have the full schedule available on the Google Maps app.
Great,
Just want to mention that.
thank you. Okay. So then we're going to written communications. And I think the only written communications I've seen are in regards to the next, actually, item D for the city selection committee reports. So I think that unless someone else has written communications, that we can address those when we get to item D.
There was one other communication I think we got about Interview.
Yeah, and maybe we can kind of brief you next Thursday on that.
Okay.
Stuart and I were just talking about it today, so.
Okay.
It actually, I mean, I just saw it today.
Yeah, okay. But it seemed pretty significant, so,
Yeah, but I'm not 100% sure from the letter exactly what's going on. I think
Okay.
I know what's going on, but I'm not 100%
okay.
sure.
So we got the letter, but let's do a little more research first. Okay.
Thank you. So that brings us to item C, which is consider a request to amend section 2.20.020 of the Brisbane Municipal Code regarding parks and recreation commissioners holding other public offices. And could we have a staff report?
Before the staff report, Madam Mayor, I should probably recuse myself since this matter deals with someone that I know very, very closely. And so,
Oh, who would that be, Cliff? No.
but I think you guys can handle it. So.
Yeah, we get it.
So if Council Member Lentz recuses himself, can he still act on behalf as a public citizen in the audience, or should he leave the room?
He can stay in the room if he would like. He's not required to do so, but he can act as a public citizen.
Okay,
You want a surprise, huh?
No pressure.
thank you. So staff report?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. The request to amend Section 2.20020 of the Brisbane Municipal Code was made. That provision currently reads, that members of the Rec Park Commission shall not hold any public office or full-time position in the city, and shall at all times during their service be residents of the city. The residency requirement of that particular provision duplicates a residency requirement that applies to all city appointed commissioners. So setting that piece aside, the requirements of this particular provision would preclude a member of the Rec Parks Commission from holding any other public office. It would also preclude a member of the Rec Parks Commission from holding a full-time position as an employee here with the city. It's my understanding that Council is considering whether to instruct our office to prepare an ordinance to repeal this provision. If Council were to repeal this provision, a member of the Rec Parks Commission would be allowed to hold another public office. There is a provision under the state law, which is called the Incompatibility of Offices Doctrine. And under that doctrine, someone cannot hold two public offices simultaneously if those offices are considered to be incompatible. That provision does not apply to someone who is holding a seat on a purely advisory commission under state law. So that provision under state law, the incompatibility of offices doctrine, does not apply to a Rec Parks Commissioner, because in Brisbane, the Rec Parks Commission is purely advisory. So if you were to repeal this provision of your ordinance, then a member of the Rec Parks Commission would be allowed to hold another public office. There would be some limitations on particular circumstances and transactions that that commissioner would be able to do when the transaction involves issues related to the school board. But the commissioner would be allowed to sit on the school board, on the Rec Parks Commission, and could, on a case-by-case basis, recuse themselves from matters that would deal with whatever the other entity was that they hold a seat on.
I think it's pretty clear. I know Ray and I were having a parking lot chat, and like, how in the heck did that even come about? You know, we're trying to go think about the historical context, and we never quite figured it out on why that.
I think it was
provision in there.
1964, right?
Yeah, 1964.
This was added to your code in 1964, and staff has done some research to see if there was a staff report that went along with this that shed some light on it, and staff has not been able to find anything to determine why this provision was adopted. This provision applies uniquely to Rec Park Commissioners. It doesn't apply to members of your other advisory committees. And so this is one, again, that is sort of singling out Rec Park Commissioners. So the question is whether or not the council wants to keep this on the books or whether it wants to repeal it.
I'm certainly okay with it. I don't understand why we had it. It'd be kind of interesting to know what the council's thought was at the time, but oh, okay. Have somebody that does remember.
We were speculating, but we didn't know for sure.
Yeah.
This is from memory only because obviously I
Can you
participated
state
in-
your name?
Oh, Michelle Salmon, Brisbane resident, and my father was on the city council at the time. I believe he was actually mayor. And I think it stems from the agreements made between the school district and the Brisbane Recreation Department concerning the recreation building up on Solano Street and the school facilities and used by Brisbane Recreation Department and vice versa. And I actually feel like it should still stand that way because we do have issues where as the school and the school board and controlling their finances and their relationships with the properties that they own and the fields that they own and the Brisbane Recreation Department and the areas that they oversee might at some point be in conflict. I can think of an example right now where eucalyptus trees owned by the school district are blocking the solar panels that heat the pool that is sort of under the aegis of the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation. I mean, that's not become a conflict yet, but it could be. And because those two entities really are kind of like separation of church and state, the school board member should have the school's best interest at heart in every way, shape, and form. The PB&R commissioners are really, I question the thing about it being an advisory role. I know OSA, Open Space and Ecology Committee, is definitely an advisory role, but the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation, they actually set pricing and make recommendations that the city council just rubber stamps. I mean, obviously you can overrule it just like you can overrule the planning commission, but it goes beyond just advisory. They actually set policy in terms of rental agreements with outsiders and that type of thing. So I kind of do think there is a conflict, and I think that our city fathers were my city father was wise in separating church and state in that. And I know at the time there was a lot of conflict between the school district and the city of Brisbane because of El Dorado Street and the condemnation that the school exacted the property. But that wasn't why this was put on the books in 1964. That was quite a few years later. It was about the property on Solano Street and the conflict between the rec department, the city, and the school, and who owned what. So that was where it stemmed from, and that's still an issue today in some ways.
I know we talked about El Dorado Street, and I was thinking that it was the city council that did the eminent domain.
Oh,
El Dorado.
no.
So-
We weren't even a city yet, Clark, when the eminent domain
It was
happened on El Dorado
kind of
Street.
interesting on what happened there. So Ray and I quite never figured out what exactly happened. I know that the recreation director at the time was also the physical education teacher, which was Rudy Benton.
Yep.
And so there was a point when the city first came in, because my father was on the council too. That,
Yes, he was.
in '64, that the city didn't have a whole lot of money, but the school district did, and now the roles have kind of reversed a little bit. So through time,
right.
but they don't set policy. They
No, they don't
recommend
set
policy.
policy.
Okay,
And
just
they
to be
don't.
clear on
I-
that.
I know, but they
Yeah.
do make
Yeah.
very concrete recommendations about pricing and actions and that type of thing.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's at your pleasure. It's not about an individual person. It's about why it was that way, and that those conflicts still have the potential to exist. And you would want each role to be wholehearted and not have that person have to step out for conflicts of interest.
Thank you, Michelle. Any,
Sure.
would you like to make a comment?
Well, I appreciate that history from Michelle, and, you know, it seems to me that, you know, it's very unique to our municipal code, and it's not part of, I don't know what other cities do, but it's not part of the state, you know, the government code. So, you know, I see that a way to deal with this, which is just to have specific areas clarified for when recusal would be recommended or necessary. But I don't think this blanket rule is necessary, because there are issues that come up in both Park and Rec and school board that are totally different, and I think it can certainly be beneficial to have somebody serving in both of those roles. So I would be in favor of repealing that provision.
I agree.
Yeah, but might as well weigh in here, right? Yeah, I find that provision a little bit too restrictive. But I also think that in the process, we need to be very clear about the specific areas of appropriate recusal, because if we don't put it in writing and make it clear, it's going to get forgotten. And then there'll be some problems that could potentially come down the road. I mean, it is the case that there is a lot of financial overlap between the school district and the city, and the city actually, in a way, subsidizes the school district pretty substantially, particularly in recreation areas and field maintenance areas, and so there are places in which there would be a potential, financial conflict. And those are the kind of conflict that, that's included in the law, that, when it's financial, it is a conflict of interest, legally, as I understand it. And so I'll let the city attorney be clear on exactly where the boundaries are. But at least from my point of view, even though I'm agreeable to going along with removing the blanket restriction, it does seem to me that we got to be really clear about what the areas in which the person on the Park and Rec Commission should not really participate in because of the potential financial conflict. And it is the case that in those days there was a lot of bad blood we know about And
No, I don't think.
the school superintendent in those days sort of ran the, a kind of a fiefdom and did his own thing and managed to anger a lot of people, but got away with it. And that doesn't mean that, things like that couldn't come up again, even though we have a lot more transparent process now than we did in those days. And even fairly recently, several school districts, the community college district and even the Brisbane school district, felt that we were kind of somehow or other hiding something in the whole redevelopment process and, threatened to sue, which is another area of conflict of interest. So, I mean, there are a number of things that I really would be more comfortable with if they were somehow or other specified in writing, so that we're clear we don't end up with a problem that has existed in the past. I mean, these are not make-up things. These are things that have actually happened. So I would hope that when we ask the city attorney to draft a change in the ordinance, and I'm not sure where we would put these things, whether should it be in a part of the ordinance or should it be in some kind of agreement or some kind of statement, or that I'll leave up to the attorney, but what form it should take. But I do feel very strongly that it needs to be in writing and it needs to have some kind of permanent quality to it, so that 10 years from now, people will say, so what did they do that for? It should be in writing. That we can't find out why in the world they actually did it, unless you have somebody who remembers, because it's not in writing anywhere. So that's a problem to me.
We can put something in writing that would explain what the guidelines would be for a Rec Parks Commissioner that was also serving as a member of the school board, assuming that you repeal this provision that would prevent it otherwise. We can give some examples. The rule of thumb, and we can explain more in writing, but the rule of thumb would be any circumstance where you would have divided loyalties, that a duty of loyalty would be owed to the city as a Rec Parks Commissioner, just like a duty of loyalty would be owed to the school district as a member of the school board. And if there is a particular transaction that is occurring that would cause or potentially cause some level of divided loyalties, that's the point at which you would need to step out. And so, this advice is coming from counsel for the city. It's not coming from counsel for the school district. And so that would be, they may have another view as well. But from the city's perspective, that is the general rule of thumb, but we can give some more specifics about likely examples where this would come up, and then other examples where if other situations occur, that's time to pick up the phone and call us so that we can figure out whether there's a problem or not. And that kind of thing can be provided in writing. That's not the kind of thing we can really put in the ordinance, because these are not they're not issues where you are setting the rules. These are rules that are set by state law.
Right.
But we can definitely provide the guidance to the council in writing, and certainly to the Rec Park Commissioner, who happens to find his or herself in this position.
So if you're saying it wouldn't be in the ordinance, then how, like, say, years down the road, there's an issue and people don't remember it, how would they be able to point to the right document? What sort of document what form would it be in?
If the council wants this to be a letter from, advice from us that is not privileged, it would be something that it would be within the discretion to actually put in the file with this ordinance, so that you can clarify our interpretation of what state law would require of the commissioner in terms of recusal. And that's something that could be made public.
It actually maybe you can make reference to it in a cover resolution. We have resolutions to introduce ordinances. Well, we'll talk about that.
We can make reference to your understanding of how this would work, and then put some more specifics in writing.
So my opinion on this is that, we all wear different hats and we have different responsibilities, and many of us serve on multiple boards and advisory committees. But it does make me worried about the divided loyalties and the overlap of financial recommendations. The city of Brisbane contracts with the school district to provide a lot of our park and rec services through the school district. And I see a problem where who is going to monitor when there is a conflict? Who's going to be deciding when that is, even if we spell it out? There are discussions that go on in a board that don't happen necessarily at the vote. They happen in conversations. They happen in many areas. And I do think that there can be conflicts with the school board and the park and rec that we don't anticipate, and we may not know what those are, but I think that the ordinance is there for a reason, and even though it's different from state law, I think that someone was thinking about a possible conflict, and that it's something that we're adding a layer of bureaucracy by allowing it to serve on two possibly conflicting boards or commissions, and that we're just sort of adding too much bureaucracy to it to allow it and put all these restrictions on it, because so many things happen in casual conversations where, as far as how a program's going to develop in the park and rec area. So I do see a conflict between the two areas.
I hear what you're saying. Unless somebody changes their mind, though, I think we go forward with it.
Well, I mean,
Discussion of putting that into place.
I mean, I think I'd like to hear from legal staff how we could actually enforce it, and who's going to be the watchdog, and why would we take that role on when we do have, a good park and rec board, and we want to have loyalty on that board to our program, and why we would add this level of oversight and responsibility to accommodate someone having multiple roles.
Well, this is certainly a policy call for the council to make, whether the council wants to maintain this restriction or whether the council wants to do away with this restriction, in which case the requirements of state law would govern here. You've gone farther in terms of protecting than state law. So it's entirely within your discretion as a council to decide what to do here. In terms of who watches and who monitors, this is an advisory body, and the decisions do come to the board, to the council. The council will be aware of which council members voted on this. And so to some degree, this will come in front of you whenever an action item is being taken. The duty to recuse is a duty not to just recuse from the actual vote, but the duty to recuse where there is a conflict would mean that the commissioner would have to refrain from participating in the discussion and the deliberation that would then lead to a vote of the planning commission. In other words, you can't just be a part of the whole process and then just step out when it comes to vote. I'm sorry, yes, to the Rec Parks Commission. So the duty to recuse is a duty that would belong to the Rec Parks Commissioner, who has the conflict. There is a duty of loyalty owed by all of the public officials to serve in their capacity, and that's a duty of loyalty which is owed to the city. And so it would be up to that particular commissioner to monitor it. But certainly, if the council became aware of it, or if staff became aware of it, or if the city attorney became aware of a situation where there was a potential conflict, that would be a conversation that we would have with the Rec Parks Commissioner, along with a recommendation of what needed to happen in that circumstances.
So to follow up on that, wouldn't it be better, and this is to my council members, wouldn't it be better to have an unencumbered Park and Rec Commissioner than one who is encumbered by these restrictions, so that we have a fully functioning, unencumbered Park and Rec Commissioner?
Yeah, well,
It's a yes or no question.
yeah, well, I have, I don't know.
No, I mean, I think that, they would have a duty of loyalty, like the city attorney said, and they take that oath of office. So, it would only be if certain issues come up where there's a potential conflict that they would recuse themselves. It's no different than when lawyers have two cases where they, or two clients that might have some interests that collide, they recuse themselves, they put up a wall, or they don't take part in working on a certain matter. And so it would be similar here. I think it would be a travesty to limit a person who might serve in both capacities from doing so. So I think it is possible to have this recusal process.
Yeah,
Yes, right?
as I said, I think absolute prohibition is too restrictive, but the appointments to the commissions are the council's, and not only are the appointments, but also we have a process of removal, which the council passed about 2 years ago, I think, something like that. And if someone was essentially behaving in a way that, basically they were rejecting the recusal process and were not fulfilling the obligations that we've spelled out, which I'm looking forward to, then the council has and maybe, come to think of it, you might want to take a look at our rules and procedures, because we have a set of reasons why the council would look at taking some kind of discipline against members of advisory commissions. And, one of them was, people aren't showing up, which is what that problem they had on the Park and Rec for a while. I mean, people would get appointed and then they wouldn't come. And so they had trouble getting quorum. And so we have a procedure now. If somebody misses such and such a number of meetings, then, and then we have a series, we warn them, and then we can suspend them, and eventually the council can say, okay, it looks as if you're really not fulfilling your responsibility, so we remove them. So the council does have that authority, but I don't think we say anything in there, because we never thought about it really, about a person on any one of these bodies who really, because of the circumstances, should recuse themselves, but then consistently refuses to do so, then the council should probably take some kind of action. And so I think maybe our rules and procedures, if you'd be so kind as to kind of look and see if that could be built in there. But I think we would control, the council would control, who gets appointed and who stays there, and if we feel that there's a problem, then we can deal with it appropriately. And it's either at the appointment stage or the evaluation stage or reappointment stage. That's kind of how I feel that we can deal with it, rather than having a across the board restriction. I can imagine people on the planning commission. Don't have to tell Clark this, who are actually also behaving in ways which have conflicts of interest.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about whether there was any reason why we would want to limit this to Parks and Rec. Maybe we want to make this recusal process something, for all our committees and commissions.
Yeah, right.
Well, there's actually a more rigid standard for members of your planning commission.
Okay.
Your members of planning commission, it's not purely advisory.
Right.
So as a result of that, the state law provision that governs incompatibility of offices applies to your planning commissioners.
Right.
So if there is an office that potentially has a conflict or would potentially require divided loyalties, then there is a prohibition to even hold both of those seats.
Okay.
That prohibition doesn't apply here when you're talking about an advisory body. So the difference between those two situations is for your planning commission, if it were to be determined that, and we would have to look closer at it to make this determination, but if it were to be determined that sitting on the planning commission is incompatible with sitting on the school board, there would be a prohibition to accept both of those offices. And so if that is the determination and someone were to find themselves holding both of those seats, the first seat they took would end by operation of law. That's a different situation than when you have an advisory position on an advisory committee or advisory commission. There is no prohibition into sitting in those seats. The obligation, however, is to recuse oneself when those conflicts come up down the road on a transaction-by-transaction basis.
Okay.
So there would be no need to apply this rule to a planning commissioner, because if this ever were to come up,
Just automatic.
it would be automatic.
Okay. But we do have now a complete street safety commission or committee, which, could deal with issues. They do look at, safe routes to schools. So imagine if someone were on that and the school board. So it seems like maybe any of the advisory committees we would want to have this recusal process for.
And you already do. It's under state law.
Okay.
So in other words, if you repeal this provision, this whole process exists under state law, and it's there whether you have this provision or not. This provision just makes it more restrictive for Brisbane rec park commissioners than for others. But if you take away this restriction, you still have the state law, and under state law, all of your advisory commissioners are required to recuse themselves if they find themselves in a situation where they would have divided loyalties based on the issue or the transaction in front of them. That's not a new rule. It isn't particular to rec and parks. It's not particular to anyone. It's a general rule that governs public officials everywhere within the state of California.
So if a Park and Rec commissioner were to be elected to city council, would that be a prohibited?
I think the circumstances in which you would have a conflict on every level, you would you would have to recuse on every level. So that, is it unlawful? I don't think it's unlawful. I'd have to look a little more carefully at that. But as a practical matter, you would never end up sitting on the planning commission, because you're going to then go right.
No, city council. Park and Rec and city council.
I'm sorry, you would never end up sitting on your Rec and Park Commission, because everything you do is going to end up at city council.
Okay.
So you would end up with a problem.
Okay. And then what portion of the Park and Rec, I shouldn't say budget, but programs are involved with this school?
Well, the primary one that I think staff has identified where there's a conflict is the teen program, which we now contract with the Brisbane Elementary School District to run. In this particular case, Commissioner Lentz was on the Parks and Recreation Teen Services Subcommittee, so she most likely, and we'll work with the city attorney, but she most likely would have to no longer participate in that subcommittee. So that's the primary one. There are other programs that we run at the schools, and so I think that would probably be a general prohibition.
2x2 committee?
Well, I mean, I would think so. It's not something I've talked to the attorney about yet, but it strikes me that the 2x2 committee, which kind of works under the rubric of the joint powers agreement between the two districts or between the two entities. So I would think that that would be a conflict, but again, I haven't had a chance to talk to city attorney about that yet.
Yeah, so it,
But that's I think Councilmember Miller's request is that
Right.
we kind of be very specific and lay all that out.
right, right.
Again, it seems that by doing that, we are limiting the efficiency of the commission and the ability for them to look at all the issues that are coming before the Park and Rec. So,
I mean, I think Stuart probably can speak better than I can in terms of the array of things that kind of fall outside of that potential conflict. I don't know, I'm putting him on the spot, but, because I mean, I think there are, in my short time with the commission, there was a number of things that we were dealing with that were not related. Maybe Stuart can embellish that.
Right. I mean, we do all the senior programs, which don't have a conflict with school district. How we operate the community centers don't have a conflict with the school district. You know, we run the after-school program and the winter camp and summer camp. That's not part of the school district, and it serves the same population. But it is on the school district grounds, but the JPA has not gone to the Parks and Recreation Commission for their advice. It's always come directly to the City Council. So, you know, those kinds of issues don't really, the Parks and Recreation Commission doesn't deal with those issues. You know, our sports programs are also after-school programs that are run, but they are run separate from the school district. So there's a number of programs that we provide potentially school district children, you know, the same children, the programs, but we don't really do it in conjunction with the school district. Yeah, I think some of the questions that we would be more of the teen-oriented programs where we are looking at, you know, paying the school district directly. We pay the school district for their homework center. That's not that's not something that has really come before the Parks and Recreation Commission. That has been something that's gone to the 2x2 subcommittee and directly to the City Council. So there are a number of areas where we don't have the conflict between the school district and the city. And I think there are, the public arts that we just recently did does not. So it's just a question of how comfortable the City Council is in finding, the best qualified people to be on the Parks and Recreation Commission. And, the last time that we asked for candidates, we had 7 at one point and we are now down to 5. So, I mean, it's one of those questions I think the City Council has to weigh as to, what is the potential for people who have interest in Parks and Recreation to also have interest in the school district, and do you have enough people within the community who can provide you the best information possible? I hope that helped.
And is there an overlap with the pool services at all?
No, I mean, we work with the school district where the school district works with us to provide a class for their students, but that's not something that we take through the Parks and Recreation Commission. Right now we're redoing the pool that actually did not go to the Parks and Recreation Commission. It came directly to the City Council. It's on, it was on land that was owned by the school district, but we don't talk to the school. We don't seek school district permission when we are doing our renovations at the pool. So, I mean, I don't see this. I don't see the same kind of conflict as when we are paying the school directly for teen services. So, in that case, we are providing $40,000 to the school district. If the Parks and Recreation Commission asked, to increase that budget from $40,000 to $60,000, that would probably be perceived as a conflict because they're making that recommendation to you for a program that would benefit the school district employees. I mean, it's a tough question to answer.
Just, now that I've had a second to think about that 2x2 question, so in this particular case, the 2x2 appointment would come actually from the school district. So that would really be something that she would need to consult the school district's council on, because she would be representing the school district in that, and under that scenario, not the city. She would be representing the school district under that scenario, not the city. But there's also a city angle to it, so that's something that we want to talk with the city attorney about.
And again, the rules that I just gave you are, again, coming from the perspective of counsel for the city. Whether there is some particular rule that the school district might have or restriction that applies uniquely to the school district is not something that we have looked at, and that would be something that Commissioner Lentz would need to check with the school district council on. So we're not answering the question as to all possible conflicts from all angles. We're addressing it from where the concern's coming from the city. And there may be other issues that that might come from the school district as well.
Thank you.
So hearing the discussion, because I'm hearing three of us are willing to go forward with something to allow it, and I guess what would that motion be?
Do we need a motion, or what would be, because we're really not approving anything tonight, we're just, the question was, do we want the staff to investigate this and come back with a proposal?
There's a recommendation, and I think that would be the motion.
Motion to,
Refer to the city attorney to draft an ordinance.
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
I can't hear you.
Refer to the city attorney to draft an ordinance change that will make the municipal code compatible with state law.
But I think we also want to make sure that we have some rules. If we're to go forward with that, I think it's a little more complex than just amending our ordinance to match state law, because I think we do want to make sure that we, if we go ahead with this, that we have additional procedures in place to make sure that we have ability to govern it. And you know, again, my concerns is how do we enforce it?
right. Yeah, so my suggestion on that was, and I think Laurie said the same thing, that we need some kind of list of areas that are likely potential candidates for appropriate recusal, so that there's a guidance as to, you know, when the commissioner, you know, needs to recuse her or himself, and how we can make sure that that is on the record so it doesn't get lost somehow in the dust of history. And number two, I think another part of the enforcement would be our rules of procedure that we passed regarding participation on all of our commissions and committees, in which people need to meet certain responsibilities, and if they fail to, then we have a process in place, a due process, really quite clearly spelled out, you know, to deal with people who are not living up to their obligations.
In addition, there would be remedies, and I can outline those for you next week, under state law for someone who doesn't comply with the state law requirements that I've outlined. So if there is a duty of loyalty that is owed, and a commissioner were to not exercise their duty of loyalty because they put themselves in a position where they had divided loyalties, there would be some remedies under state law as to that conflict of interest. So I can outline those for you as well. So, you know, but also we can look at the procedure that would be essentially removing a commissioner because of some level of disappointment about the commissioner not complying with the obligation to recuse his or herself. So we can look at both of those things.
Okay.
And if we do this, amend the section, this isn't just for a position on a school board. That's the one we're sort of tailoring this amendment for a specific situation, which makes me a bit uncomfortable that we're looking at amending our laws for a specific situation that's come up. But, it's not necessarily only for school board.
Absolutely not.
On
That's
some
the,
other,
It would just be repealing this requirement that they would have to resign if they get elected to an office that conflicts with an advisory role. But it doesn't sound like it would be specific to school board.
it absolutely would not be specific to the school board. It would, again, just be repealing this provision, which in and of itself doesn't even mention the school board, but it sounds like that was the context in which it was passed.
Right.
well, that's how this particular item came up at this particular time,
Right.
was for one particular incident.
And it's probably why it's there in the first place.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. So Clark, I assume your motion includes all that?
Yes. I thought it was your motion, but yes, that's okay.
Because then I'll second.
All right.
So this is this something that if we move forward with this, that it is repealed and would go into second reading of,
Eventually. Well, we're not introducing anything tonight.
Yeah,
We're
it
just
would
asking
be-
them to do the research.
Right, it'd be first reading would be, the earliest first reading would be next week. And assuming that we can get all this together in a timely fashion for you. And then the second reading would be in February, or in January 15th, excuse me. And then your ordinances don't go into effect until 30 days
30
afterwards.
more days, yeah.
So we're talking about at the very earliest, the middle of February, that it goes into effect.
and as of this time, the particular situation has been remedied that this applies to, changing this ordinance.
The commissioner has stepped down from the
Oh, yes, she has.
from the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Okay,
So right now, we have a commission of 4 people.
okay. So that would be our only time-sensitive issue is
Right, to reappoint a 5th person if you would like,
if we wanted to reappoint.
or appoint a 5th person.
Appoint, yes. Okay. So I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? No?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those against? That'd be me.
So may I bring up something else in regards to this? It seems to me that we have opportunities for additional appointments if we wish on virtually all of our committees anyway, not the planning commission, but on open space and ecology is down to 5, right? Parks and Rec. Yeah. And Park and Rec is now down to 4, and Complete Streets and Safety could use 1 or 2 more. So I'm thinking that maybe we could coordinate I know that the Complete Street and Safety is kind of out there now, but it's sort of on its own. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but and I know some people were interested. I don't know whether they're applying or not, but I was thinking maybe we could coordinate all of that and, try to run a campaign to say that these openings are available and try to make that all coordinated. Does that make sense?
It's a good idea, because the start of a new year,
Yeah.
people are usually more interested in taking on new roles.
Sherry? That you can manage all that? Does it make sense to you?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. If you're directing me to fill are those 2 committees that are of 5 now can go up to 7?
Yes.
So,
Planning Commission cannot, but all
Right.
the others can.
so normally when there's a certain, every other year, there are vacancies.
Right.
And I do a normal recruitment for all the commissions. This year, that's not the case.
Right.
There are 5. They don't have to be 7.
But I'm
So,
suggesting.
but if you give me direction that you want to recruit to go to 7 for those, then I can do that.
I'm suggesting, since we're,
Right.
the only fair way to do the Park and Rec is to have an open nomination process.
Oh, on
and-
that, right.
And so then why not include
them all
in that
together.
process all the other openings as well,
Sure. if
because
that's
they all
what you
could use
want.
some, more people. So why not?
Sure. If you would like that, I can do it.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Do we want to invite Councilmember Lentz back in?
No, let's leave him out.
Unless he's gone home for the evening?
Maybe he's gone to sleep, I don't know.
Just ate 15 candy bars.
Yeah, right.
Now he's got to run another 26 miles.
I don't think he always knows how things are.
How many candy bars do you?
Nobody threw up.
Heck, though, geez, I thought it was gonna take 5 minutes.
Nothing takes 5 minutes.
No, you know us.
Not with this bunch.
I've learned that already.
Clark said.
Should have known better than that, Cliff.
Well, wishful thinking.
So that brings us to the next item for discussion, and that is to give direction to the mayor for the city selection committee, that the committee meets on the 19th.
Seems like there's only 3 items that are in contention here.
Well, we keep getting more letters, and what I found out is that anybody who didn't get their letter in by the deadline can be nominated from the floor. So they aren't going to put them into the official packet, but they will be available for election on the night of. So I think we have 3 that are currently contested. And that's the Area Air Quality Management District. We have Mayor David Canepa and Kirsten Keith. And then I believe, and Liza Normandy?
Normandy.
Liza
South
Normandy from South San Francisco, who are vying for that position as of now. I have talked to David Canepa and Kirsten Keith. I've received outreach phone calls from both of them. And I don't know if any other members have.
I've talked to David numerous times on this. He called me originally. I said, well, the council decides, give direction on the mayor for the first round. And I suggested that he call the rest of the council members. And
You called me?
Yep, I received calls from the 2 of them as well, not from
I
Liza.
told David I would support him. At the time, nobody else was on there, and I haven't heard from Liza or Kirsten regarding this, and I still would support David.
I personally would support David. He reached out to me. He's interested in trying to use some of the tools that the BAAQMD has to work on some of the trail system, and I think he has a good vision for that. And if I'd be happy to hear from the other council members.
I would support Kirsten for this. I know her a little bit personally. I think she's a good person and has a lot of great experience. You see from her letter, she's the vice chair of CCAG. She's chair of the I can't pronounce that, the Creek Joint Powers Authority. And then she's a director of BASCWA. And so she's, clearly got some environmental interests. I have no doubt maybe the other 2 have qualifications as well, but I would support Kirsten.
Right.
But I know all 3 of them as well, and they're all good. But I did speak personally with David. I have not heard from the other 2. And I told him that I would vote for him. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I didn't know even that the others were going to run. So it's a little bit you know, unfortunate that the way this process works, you know, people wait till the last minute, which I think is kind of unfortunate because, you know, then you think, well, you know, if I had known this, if I had known that, but I didn't know this and I didn't know that, and I talked to David and I said I'd vote for him, so I stick to my word.
Okay.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I spoke to all three. I did speak with David Caneper first, but you know, just some of the things that happened with the Daly City Council, you know, some of their meetings, and it kind of, I don't know, what he was promoting to be on the, you know, on this board, you know, contradicted, you know, some of his actions on the council. So, but I did talk with Kirsten Keith, and I think she has much better qualifications. I also spoke with Liza Normandy too. I think Liza also has some good skills, but I think just looking at all three people who are seeking the appointment, I think Kirsten Keith is the strongest and would be the person that would represent us in the rest of the county in a significant way.
So what I'm hearing is that in the first round, we have a majority for David Canepa, and if it goes further than that, I've got two council people that are in favor of Kirsten.
After that, it's your,
Yeah, I think sure. Yeah, whatever you want to do.
it's your call.
Okay.
Whatever you choose to do at that point, Terry.
Right.
And I did want to point out that we do have another meeting prior to the vote, and that I have asked staff to put an addition that we can have an additional conversation about this briefly at the next meeting if we do get other letters that, you know, influence us enough to want to discuss it. So.
Well, I'm kind of like Ray. I mean, I made a commitment, and I just don't want to.
Right, and I agree with that, but if circumstances on the ground change substantially,
Sure.
that we do have an opportunity to talk about it again before we go there. So I just wanted to bring that up. So then on the San Mateo County Transit District, Samtrans, we have two candidates. We have Mayor Wayne Lee from City of Millbrae and Councilmember Charles Stone from the City of Belmont. We have any comments on that appointment?
I don't really know Charles. I don't even think I met him, actually. I know Wayne, you know, and you know, Wayne's Wayne, you know. He's come here to our council meeting, you know, and I believe he asked for our support then.
Yes,
Right.
he did.
He did.
He did.
And I appreciated that. So, I mean, for me, I would go with Wayne, but you know, I don't know.
Yeah, you know, I've talked with both. You know, you know, Charles Stone is, you know, he is relatively new to the Belmont Council, but he's been quite active on, you know, with Caltrain, and he's an attorney. He's, you know, we actually talked in pretty great length about what he would do on Samtrans, and he's very interested in not just the north-south corridor, but connecting us east and west, which I think is extremely important. So often, you know, the conversation is about, you know, north and south along, you know, El Camino or, yeah, some of these other north-south corridors, and we forget that most people are connected, or you know, live, you know, on either side. So, I would support Charles.
And I would support Charles as well. He actually reached out to me quite early. I think I got a phone call from him in September when I was down in LA at the conference, League of Cities conference.
Wow.
So before Wayne came to our
Yeah, and
council meeting.
I've spoken to Wayne. I've not heard from Charles.
Yeah, but my take on Charles, I haven't spoken to Wayne about this position, but I've met him in various meetings. But Charles, I see as really bringing some new energy. He's done a lot of great things for Belmont. He's very collaborative, quick thinker. They have this new code of civility, so I think he's going to be really good at just bridging collaboration in whatever role he's in. So I would support Charles.
Ray?
Your call, Ray.
And, the irony is that I don't know either one very well. I mean, I've met them, and I think, Laurie, when you were on that Penn TV show with the newly elected council members, wasn't
He was
there?
one of the people, yeah.
Yeah.
I met him actually at the new council member meeting up in Sacramento last January. And then we had the joint interview together, exactly. And I was really impressed by just his poise, his answers. I mean, he was speaking like a trial attorney kind of thing. And, I think he's got great energy and ideas. And is that the rain?
Airport noise. Getting loud here.
So, I can't speak for Wayne. I haven't seen him really in action as much, but I was very impressed with Charles.
I just wonder if we have more in common with the views of people more on this end of the corridor of the county than we do of the southern end of the county, as far as services and where divided loyalties run.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you have to, keep those in mind. But, just in my dealings with Charles, I never felt that he was the type of person that, would play that game, that he would be straight up and look at this as a county position, not, trying to, gain political favor.
Okay. So we're coming down to Ray.
I'm going to make life difficult for you because I really don't have a preference. I mean, I don't know either one of them well enough to say, I really prefer this one over that one.
Okay, I got a suggestion. Let's
So what do
defer
you
it till
think?
next week.
Okay.
To talk about it again next week?
In sake of getting this meeting over with.
Yeah, right.
Let's
But,
talk about
it
it.
doesn't make any sense to me to sort of arbitrarily pick one when I.
Defer it to next week and then,
Yeah,
Okay.
if,
And I haven't heard from either one of them.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, you heard from Wayne when he came here.
Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
not in this context.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next contested one is the council member to serve on the San Mateo County Transportation Authority. And we have Vice Mayor Terry Nagel of the City of Burlingame and Council Member David Lim of the City of San Mateo. I have spoken with Terry Nagel, and I have not spoken with David Lim.
Yeah, I sent Terry your way, actually. So Terry had asked me what our process was, and I said the council decides the first round for the mayor to vote, and then after that, if it goes into a second round, the mayor chooses. I said that Terry's going to be the next mayor. I've known Terry and served on numerous boards with her, and she's thoughtful, very, very thoughtful. And David, I met him, and that's it. I don't really know much about David. He never reached out.
Well, I have served with Terry on the CCAG board, and she is very involved and is very thorough and seems very fair as far as, looking at different angles on things. I don't really know David.
So I haven't heard from Terry Nagel about this, but I did hear from David Lim. And I actually reached out to him again after we had a brief conversation and kind of picked his brain a little bit more about why, why he was interested in what he thought his qualifications were. What he explained to me was that, San Mateo, which he represents, has, been very embracing of, accepting of high-speed rail, perhaps in contrast to some other cities which have, filed CEQA lawsuits. So in terms of funding opportunities, perhaps, his interests are more aligned with, what might be best for the county and all cities in looking at opportunities for Measure A funds. And also, he did mention that he had a connection with a contact at the Transportation Authority in San Francisco, and he was very keenly aware of our issues with San Francisco and possible relocation of Caltrain. And they had reached out to him for his advice, and he said, straight up, I support Brisbane being a member of a city in San Mateo County, that he would support Brisbane. So I think he really does have our interests in mind and would, be able to use his potential connections and issues that would protect our interests. I don't know much about Terry, but
Terry, I believe, has been serving out on the TA at this, is currently on it as a fill-in. But we also discussed the Caltrain's relocation and supporting actually the city of Burlingame's issues with closing down the one Caltrain station to weekends only, and that she's been getting discussions about reopening that once electrification comes through. And I'm not sure how our council still feels about high-speed rail, because I know originally Clark thought that might have been an overstepping of money, and that electrification was a more realistic view than high-speed rail through the peninsula.
High-speed rail from San Francisco to San Jose is problematic. There's a lot of problems with it that haven't been worked out, and basically they were really trying to
ram it down the throat.
Shove their rail yard down our throat, and when we talked with them, they wanted to put their maintenance yard right in the middle of the garbage dump portion of the Baylands, and wanted to dig down 50 feet. Remember that, Clay, when we had that meeting?
So back to the issue at hand. What's our council's pleasure? I'm assuming we have Lori for David.
Mm-hmm.
Ray?
Never met David, but he sounds good. Terry Nagel, I know. She's okay too. So I don't really have a preference. So next week?
Oh,
Because I haven't heard from
Well,
anyone.
let's try to get a 3-2 or
You're committal.
a 3-2 or
Okay, Cliff.
see if we need to discuss it next week.
Do you have a preference, Cliff? Because you know both,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I do, I know both of them, but I haven't spoken to either one
Yeah,
in
neither have
regards
I.
to this. So, but, it sounds like Lori has had pretty good discussions with David in regards to this position.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys have had discussions with Terry in regards to this
I've had,
position.
yeah.
I have.
I would be more willing, or I would be leaning towards Terry Nagel, and I did tell her that I would support her personally. But again, so we've got.
Yeah, just to support you at this meeting, and you made that commitment. It's important, I think, for you to have those relationships. So I'm going to go with Terry.
Okay. Well, I didn't promise her the full council's support.
No,
I mean,
no.
certainly.
It would always be foolish to do that, right?
So Clark,
Well, I already said it, Terry.
Terry, okay?
But, I
And-
mean, you know, Lori certainly makes a good case with David, but, you know, he needed to really reach out, I think, probably to.
Yeah, and I did give him all of your phone numbers because he said he was interested in reaching out, but I guess he just didn't get a chance to contact.
Yeah.
Haven't heard.
It was yesterday, yeah.
So I'm gonna,
He could have called.
I'm gonna pencil in Terry at this point, and so we'll come back to next week to the Samtrans, the TA.
Okay.
And now I lost my agenda. Gee, we have oral communications too. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? Please come on up, Michelle.
I'm really just waiting to give you a ride home, Madam Mayor. First of all, I did want to say the comments about the commissioner versus the school board was not personal. I think Karen does a fine job. It really is about the big picture. What if it's somebody who doesn't do a fine job? Just to make sure that controls are in place. I would like to have all the subcommittee notices on the web. If we have the time to put what the farmers market is featuring on the web, I think we should really have all of our subcommittee meetings noticed on the web. That's way more important than who's got oranges this week. Sorry, priorities. And please notice me by email. But I think that if the public knows things are happening more and is more used to looking for it and easier to find it, we might actually get more participation and I can stay home, which would be really nice. And then on the pool maintenance issues, I hope that we plan for ongoing maintenance so that we don't get stuck with a huge maintenance issue like we have right now. Like I've watched this one pole on the pavilion just kind of rust away. And when I started using the pool on a regular basis 3 years ago, I was so tempted to just go out there with some Rust-Oleum and paint it myself to arrest the rust. And it seems to me that an ongoing maintenance program would be a lot easier to swallow than, spending, $300,000 fixing up the pool. So I hope that we can work on an ongoing maintenance for it because it really is a treasure that's used by so many, both Brisbane residents and non-residents.
Can I say something?
Yes.
No, I just wanted to note that we now have a new pool manager. I don't know that that's been officially announced at the council meeting anyway. Maybe, Stuart, you'd want to, but I think the way those things get handled on a regular basis is that somebody is directly responsible for it. And that hasn't been the case for a while, but that is the case now. And so, right, Stuart?
Yes, and we're also instituting walking through all of our facilities on a monthly basis to note anything that we need to submit to Public Works for work requests.
Good.
So we're beginning to, work through all those kinds of issues that we have not, had opportunities to do in the past.
Yeah, because I noticed the Mission Blue is also looking a little shabby and the window tracks are filthy. And that usually leads eventually to window leakage. And then the third thing that I wanted to say is I really wanted to thank Randy Bro when he was here, and I did thank him during the during our break for the really good job that the Public Works has done today, but also in taking care of the little things. If you notice something that's not right, tell them and then fix it, But they can't be everywhere all the time. And I was annoyed because the lights on the board, the announcement board, were not aimed properly and were not working. And I found myself going, what's that say? Instead of watching the road because it was dark and it wasn't working and the lights pointing wherever. And as soon as I told Randy, it was fixed. He just didn't happen to drive by there at night all the time. So I just really appreciated the responsiveness of Public Works for the different issues. And then today they were absolute heroes. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Second. Thank you. Then we are adjourned.